So when a lot of people think about a mental hospital, the many images that may come up in their mind is, oh, padded room with a patient in a straitjacket being monitored by a bunch of scientists. And I'll be honest, that's partly true and partly not true. So the movies kind of over-exaggerate the whole situation. Personally, I've only been in 3 mental hospitals, but in the padded rooms that I've been in, it wasn't as dramatic as the movies like to show. I remember I was watching this episode of Family Guy, and Peter Griffin, he's in a straitjacket and he's in a padded room screaming, slamming his head on the wall, and technically parts of that does apply to real life, parts of it doesn't. So when I was first admitted into a mental hospital, I would have to go through the ER. And while in the ER, there's a thing where you have to be processed before you're admitted to a mental hospital, whether that be on island, off island, whatever's able to take you at the time. And for me, no rooms were open in any of the mental hospitals near me, and so I had to just wait for one of them to have an open slot for another patient. And I waited over 20 hours in that padded room. Doctors would come in and out, assess me. They would talk to me, oh, what are your symptoms? Why you want to be admitted and all that. And it was interesting. So the story starts. I was walking, I went to the ER and the nurse brought me. We were walking down a hallway and I entered this room, not a room, but this hallway where at the very end there was this hexagon kind of shape, and each side of the hexagon had a door on it. And little did I know that the nurse would walk up, open one of the doors, and be like, you're going to be staying in here for a while. And guess what? It's a padded room. There was a pillow, I think, and a blanket, and it was absolutely cold. It was so freezing. But it wasn't absolutely horrible. I mean, it was pretty horrible, but it wasn't absolutely horrible. I can think of other worse things. And being in there for even more than 2 hours can make anyone get extremely bored. So me being my not athletic, but me being my energy craving self, I just started to exercise, do calisthenics, bodyweight exercises, squats, squats, push-ups, stuff like that. And it did manage to pass time a little bit, but I probably only got through 2 hours, I would say, doing exercises before I was like, okay, I'm fucking bored already. So a big reason why it took so long was because no beds were open for me to be admitted into a mental hospital. What that means is there are a certain amount of beds in every hospital. I think the main one has, I want to say, there's 2 for each room, and there's 9 rooms. So that about 18 children can fit into one mental hospital, at least for teens, because at the time I was still a teenager. So yeah, there were no beds in any of the mental hospitals, so I had to stay and wait to be admitted. I had to wait until one of the beds became free, and that wait was absolutely horrible, especially this thing that happened. I was in the padded room. It was the middle of the night. My doctors had just changed my dosages, and so on my medication, and so I was getting weird, wonky, wibbly bobbly. It's weird. It's just a really weird state of mind where your body is so reliant on this one medication, but the doctors are like, nope, let's switch it up. So I was not exactly in the most, I want to say, stable mind. I mean, I wasn't stable to begin with, but being switched on meds didn't help at all. And it didn't help at all when another patient started screaming and bashing his head on the wall. And it was very scary, because not only was I literally feet away from this guy, but security was called, and a lot of security came. And they were yelling and screaming and thrashing around, and the guy was threatening to hurt himself if the security guards weren't gonna leave him alone. Like, if they didn't leave him alone, he would hurt himself. And he actually kind of did. I mean, he was in a very, very agitated state. From the way he was acting, I think he was probably high on something. Probably one of those hard drugs like meth or something like that. I mean, you need to be in a very intoxicated state in order to even act like that. I mean, if you were there, you'd know what I mean. But the poor guy, he bashed his head on the wall. There was blood and teeth, and I was very uncomfortable. I was just sitting there, and then I went over to the corner, and I sat in the corner, and I tried to curl up in a little ball, trying to use my body heat as warmth, and while I'm just listening to this guy screaming, and security screaming at him, and this whole back and forth. It was not fun. But luckily, okay, if that was 1 o'clock in the morning, then about 13 hours later, I would have left. And that is what I mean by, in some aspects, the movies are kind of similar to reality because of my subjective experience, but in other aspects, it's really not. The whole reason that people are in those padded rooms is to keep them safe. Not from necessarily other people, but from themselves. And that's why it's so important. But yeah, this video is a lot of me rambling, so I hope you enjoyed. Catch you in the next one. Ahoy ho, malama pono.